Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, I am Justin Daniels. I am a shareholder and corporate M&A and tech transaction lawyer at the law firm Baker Donaldson, advising companies in the deployment and scaling of technology. Since data is critical to every transaction, I help clients make informed business decisions while managing data privacy and cybersecurity risk. And when needed, I lead the legal cyber data breach response brigade.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, e-commerce, professional services, and digital media. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more and to check out our best-selling book, Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time, visit redcloveradvisors.com. It is hard to believe that we're in December recording a podcast in 2024. How are we already in December?
How have we been doing this for 4 years?
Because we're having so much fun.
Okay. I think she's had 3 espressos this morning.
I did not. I only had 1 cup of coffee.
You can fool me.
I'm just a happy person.
You're chatty Jody.
I am chatty Jody. Okay, well, today we're going to be chatting. This is going to be fun. This is going to be like the 3 J's podcast because we have Julia Shullman, who is the general counsel and chief privacy officer at Telly, the world's first dual screen smart TV fully paid for by advertising. Prior to Telly, Julia was general counsel and chief privacy officer at TripleLift through its $1.4 billion acquisition by Vista Equity Partners. She is recognized as an industry leader at the intersection of privacy, product, advertising, policy, and strategy. And she is here to talk all about it with us today. So welcome to the 3 J's show.
Thank you for having me, Jody and Justin.
Now that's your turn.
So, Julia, I swear she must have had like serious espressos today.
I'm still working through my coffee.
No, Julia, whatever happy pill she took, I'd like to we need to market that. Anyway, why don't you tell us about your career journey?
Sure. So, as I thought about this one, there's sort of 2 themes to my career. It's been taking opportunities when presented and then just trying to get as broad and diverse experience as possible. So, Justin, I actually started my career as an M&A attorney at Latham during actually pre-financial crisis back in the aughts. So saw a lot of crazy stuff, but didn't think that was for me. So I went in-house, took whatever job I could get, given it was the financial crisis at the time, ended up in B2B media and events. And from there, found myself at 2 different ad tech companies. So at AppNexus, which is now part of Microsoft, I had a number of different roles, product counsel, and was handed the privacy officer role when the head of privacy left. And they needed someone to run the team that knew about the industry and understood products and services and the commercial interests at play in the industry. And then from there, I went over to TripleLift, and that was a wild ride through the COVID crisis, and we sold the company pretty quickly thereafter. And I've now gone to an adjacent company in the space where we certainly focus a lot on advertising at Telly, but I'm also getting to work on manufacturing and hardware and intellectual property. So if you kind of look at my career over the last 2 decades, it's been a lot of different things, but I think really just trying to take opportunities as they're presented to me, get diverse experience, and work on big, broad, gnarly issues, kind of looking from top down, bottoms up.
So I kind of want to ask you a follow-up question because you talked about your initial part of your career that was spent in M&A, and just now that you're in-house, you have this really specific privacy and ad tech background. Any thoughts for our audience around what that M&A experience, the kind of foundation that provided you as you got into these other gnarly areas?
Yeah, so two things that I always think about. I mean, one, I always come into a company and think about kind of what are our goals. And I tend to go into early stage companies. So I'm always looking at the company through the lens of, what can I do on the legal side, on the compliance side, and on privacy side to set the company up for success. And that's not just from a legal perspective, but it's also the narrative and how we think about marketing ourselves and we think about exit opportunities. And then I think the second piece is, and you probably recognize this, working on M&A, you're always working with a cross-functional team. You're the ringleader, and you're going out to all these specialists and ensuring as you're either helping a company sell itself or looking to buy a company, that each of the different functions are working in tandem and really understand that bigger picture and understand each other's issues to make it all work and make us have a good outcome. And on the legal side and on the privacy side, I mean, think about all the clients you guys work with. It's not a siloed issue and it's not a siloed function. You are kind of quarterbacking technology, marketing, product, operational matters, boarding up to the board and talking to clients and ensuring the sales process works. So it's a very complicated project with a lot of different pieces to it. And I think M&A set me up for success on that front, just because I learned from a very early age and a very early start of my career that, you couldn't just kind of sit and work in a silo.
I just wanted to bring that up because I think an undervalued skill of general counsel is your ability to connect the dots. And it seems that your M&A background has really paved the way, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, for you to connect dots, be able to help cross-functional teams, be able to issue spot and either handle it yourself or bring in the right people to resolve whatever that issue may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were handed this privacy team, and then from there, you've had the opportunity to be chief privacy officer at multiple companies. What is your approach in this role in building a program, especially as you just shared, a lot of early stage companies?
I think you'll be shocked to hear that I take a pretty practical and realistic perspective to it. And once again, I think maybe we'll talk about this a bit later, but I really take a step back and look at who the players are at the company and what the business model is and the operational processes, the technology, and the personalities at the table, and figure out how to put a program in place that kind of works for the company's risk tolerance, stage, maturity, potential growth, and just how it actually operates. And that really differs company to company. And I will say, as an example, I worked at two different supply side platforms in the ad tech space that from the outside looked like honestly the same company, to the point where their founders had started at the same company and they operated very differently under the hood, just in terms of processes, personalities, and how they got things done. And so even at two almost identical companies to the industry, the privacy programs that I and my team put together were very different programs.
Can you share an example, perhaps, where the personalities impacted how you might do something different?
Yeah, so maybe two examples. One was truly just communication and how the company managed larger initial cross-functional projects and then kind of steady state. One company, you were constantly giving presentations, constantly putting together decks. They had one set of tooling that they used to track cross-functional projects, and the other company, everything was asynchronous, and everything was a bit frankly siloed team to team. And so we had to go out and use different tools across different teams versus at the other company. We used one set of tools, and one company spent a lot of time in meetings and talking face to face. Another company, frankly, we used a lot of like Google Docs, Slack, and email, and that can be very different for different personalities in a room. And it can kind of be easier to get things done sometimes on the privacy front and very challenging. And then the second one that might resonate with folks who get a bit more technical was actually how the product roadmap process worked. and how engineering product and subject matter expert product leaders, which I have always been on the privacy side. I've always kind of operated as both CPO and the privacy product manager, influenced the roadmap and how we actually put together product requirements.
Thank you for sharing. So helpful. Will you stop laughing at me? I could talk like a robot instead. Would this be better? Is more monotone a better approach for you?
Wow, you sound like a late night DJ.
Oh, I have the cool mic. Maybe we could test it out.
So, Julia, wanted to maybe understand your perspective a little bit about how do you successfully balance the privacy and the business monetization goals around data?
Yeah, so this is also, an interesting one, and I'll say, and I'll lay the groundwork for, and I'd said this previously, I ended up in privacy through the product counsel route, and so I had started looking at privacy through a product counsel lens, maybe as opposed to a policy or a privacy expert lens. So I had always been embedded with product teams and engineering teams and strategy teams, thinking about the top level goals of the company, of the industry, how a company made money, and then frankly, how all the other folks in the industry operated, used data, and made money. So the way I think about it is, what are your goals? How has the industry operated historically? What's the history there from a monetization perspective, from a strategy and a privacy perspective? What is everyone else doing? And then figuring out, based on that and based on your company's position in the industry, what are your opportunities strategically around both collection, use, sharing of data, and privacy and requirements as they're going to be changing. And I'll give an example of this. And I always look at this from an ad perspective. If you look at the advertising ecosystem, which, Jody, I know you spend a lot of time working with clients in the space, you will probably not be shocked to think that all of us in the space have different strategic interests and different relationships with direct consumers and with each other, sort of based on our position in that ecosystem and how close we are to the consumer and how close we are to the actual ad dollars that are spent by marketers. And so if you look at people's structural position and their strategic position in the ecosystem, they're going to look at privacy requirements differently, and they're probably going to try to interpret them differently to benefit them. For example, a DSP who sort of sits the furthest away from a consumer, maybe doesn't have direct relationships with them and has to rely on a publisher, a supply side platform, and a number of other platforms to share data all the way down to them, is going to try to take an interpretation that they can access and use data as long as there are contracts in place and as long as a consumer is maybe not opted out, versus a publisher or someone who sits much closer up to the consumer and has a direct relationship and knows that they have this valuable relationship, is maybe going to try to interpret a law to me. And, we should actually hold on to this data. We shouldn't be sharing it more broadly. We should create a technology where that data needs to sit up with us, and maybe we'll share it, with other folks in the ecosystem in a more controlled manner. But it gives structural and strategic control to those companies that sit closer to the consumer. And I think an example of this, frankly, is Google and what they've done with Privacy Sandbox. And then, it's what a lot of the bigger publishers have been doing around their first party data in the past couple of years, as they've sort of looked strategically to take advantage of privacy regulations, as opposed to just like putting together a compliance checklist and checking a bunch of boxes off. And I see, Jody, you're nodding, so you see this all the time, I'm sure.
Well,
I do. But Justin has a question.
Well, I guess, Julia, the other thing I wanted to ask you was, you go into a lot of these earlier stage companies and would love to get your perspective on how you sell business people, particular senior leadership. It may even be the board or their investors, on why you need to have a privacy program, why you need to pay attention from the get-go. Because I still run into plenty of times when I work with some earlier stage companies, oh, we'll just get a privacy notice off the internet. It'll be the same thing. I'm like, guys, you're in healthcare. So I'd love to get your perspective on how you fared and what you do in that respect.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and comes up on every deal, every financing deal, every exit, you name it. I sell it across a couple of different channels, and it sort of depends on the company and their business model and their strategy. But number one, I do look, at strategic goals and opportunities. Again, if you're in the ad tech space, like this is truly strategic to your defensive and offensive moves in the ecosystem. You might not exist in a couple of years if you don't think about the data that you get access to and how you operate, and your structural position vis-a-vis your competitors. So that's one thing. The second piece is, because most of these are early stage companies, they want to have an exit at some point. I need to raise capital. I make it very clear that this is going to be a big item in diligence from anyone who's looking at the company to invest or buy them. And to your point, Justin, you can't just slap a random privacy notice up, because most law firms have gotten much more sophisticated about this, and they're going to do their diligence, and they're going to raise a flag to companies that are looking at investing or buying you, either that you have a compliance issue, or frankly, that your business model doesn't work. And maybe you're going to have to go dump all your data, and it's not going to be as valuable an asset, or they're just going to walk away. And then the third piece is, or actually there's two other pieces. The third piece is sales. So how are you going to keep operating? Everyone has some kind of sales relationship that has data at play. And I find that it makes those sales processes go much smoother if you have your act together, and your outward facing program makes sense. And then you also have your talking points, and you've educated your sales team on this. And then the last piece is PR. Like, no one wants to get a bad headline out there. Number one, they don't want to have investigations, which is sort of the outlying major risk. But if it happens, no one wants to deal with that. And then I think just day to day, no one wants to be a company where anytime someone goes to Google them because they're thinking about doing a partnership or buying their product or something, and a bad headline pops up about privacy, it's just going to slow things down, or it's going to make someone walk away. So all of those really make the board on down kind of perk up and recognize that this is a foundational matter that you should invest in from the start, because it's going to hurt your ability to grow, and it's going to hurt your ability to exit.
Were you going to say something?
Julie, I wanted to ask you one other thing that was of interest to me. When you talk about the privacy programs and getting the board on board and the senior leadership team, have you seen in your experience or talked to other colleagues instances where lack of a good privacy program, or cybersecurity for that matter, has either caused a major partner to walk away, or maybe changed the purchase price at an exit, or maybe the holdback, or some material terms because your privacy and security house was not in order?
Yes, I've either seen all of the above, or I've heard of all of the above. I think, the thing that I hear happens probably the most, and this is any issue that pops up in a financing or an M&A deal, is you're trying to move fast, right? Speed kills deals. And so if you don't have your house in order, and someone starts asking these questions, and you're running around and you're trying to clean stuff up, or you're having to work with your counsel or your engineering team or product team to put responses together or figure out what you did wrong, you lose speed and you lose time. And it sometimes it just makes deals fall apart, number one, because the market shifts so quickly these days. I think the second piece is, I have definitely heard of companies seeing terms change on them. So either they've seen discounts, again, in the ad tech space, if an investor really gets smart and realizes that they haven't been doing what what they should have been doing, and there's certainly a risk that they might not be able to use data that they have, or their systems might not actually operate the way that they need to do. They've definitely discounted the price, or they've put in a holdback. And then, the last one is where I've really only seen this with like cybersec issues, or truly bad, ad tech issues, where an investor or a purchaser just understands that a company has completely missed the boat. They've just walked away from the deal entirely because they don't want to touch it. So these are not just check the box compliance issues. They truly either can kill deals, or impact purchase price, or slow things down materially. I don't know. Have you guys seen that?
I mean, so I've seen that. I've seen sales for sure not be able to be closed because they don't have what they need to in order, or delayed. It's oh wait, now I actually have to go do XYZ. So there's a little bit of a delay. And then I've also been talking to some firms where they want to have their privacy ducks in order so that when they exit, they won't run into that. So they're doing the preparation to ensure they'll have a good exit. Because if they didn't, then everything that you just described would happen.
Yeah. And then I will say the other thing I've seen, and I don't know, Justin, if you see this maybe on larger transactions that you're on the opposite side of, I have seen acquirers definitely engage the wrong counsel to do diligence for them. And they've asked all the wrong questions. And that, I'm not going to help you answer questions you didn't ask. So sorry that, you don't understand the business that you're investing in or you're buying. But if you didn't ask the question, you're certainly not bringing it up.
I've seen that too. So how would you advise someone trying to set up a privacy program, or maybe they have one, but it could use some help?
It's middling.
That was the word I was thinking of. Thank you. And kind of tied to that is I like what you said before around how your experience as product counsel really helped your thinking from a product engineering strategy business objective point of view and then you're adding in the privacy pieces. So many people who are trying to build privacy programs don't have that knowledge. I've learned a law. I have a checklist. Now I'm supposed to convince these people they should pay attention to me. What would you offer and suggest to those types of people?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think first, again, take a step back and understand how your industry manages privacy and what are folks doing and how do they think about the requirements as it applies to your industry. Second is get to know your engineering and your marketing teams and any of those cross-functional leads that you're going to have to partner with and work with and probably get resources from. Understand how they operate, understand their processes, their systems, and also, really talk to them about the requirements and don't dictate to them, frankly, how they're going to support those requirements. Partner with them on what the actual solution is. I've gotten in trouble in the past from engineering leads when I've tried to tell them how to do stuff, right? You give them the requirements and they turn around and talk to you about a couple solutions on how to manage those. And then, think about a framework and get the right advisors on board. And I think, you all have definitely raised awareness on this, and I've seen other folks starting to raise awareness on it as well. But sure, you need a good privacy attorney, but you also need someone who operationally knows how to put a privacy program in place and understands the technical issues and the operational issues that you're going to deal with, because not many lawyers kind of are operational gurus or technical gurus. We can't all do it all. And so it takes a village. And if you just hire some big law firm to manage all this stuff with you, you're probably going to spend a lot of money and not have the right program in place.
Good advice. It is very much that balance. I really love what you talked about because I think there's room for both. And I often actually compare this to HR. There are HR attorneys and HR consultants. Both have to know HR laws and both can do a variety of areas. And then they both also excel in particular areas. And so when we're thinking about operationalizing, you have all these requirements. You have to understand product, or maybe you're a service offering. You still have to understand what is the data that's flowing. What are the tools? What are the systems? And then what are the compliance obligations? And how do you make that come to life? In my HR example, I can have a policy. Do I just literally put it on a dusty shelf, or do I have to do something in any of the steps, like in recruiting or in onboarding or in performance management or in any of the parts? You have to have someone who knows how to make it work.
Yeah. And it's really educating a company, I think, that and people understand this on the HR front these days because it's just been decades at this point and having more sophisticated HR programs. But if you hire in a privacy expert to a company, they're not going to be able to do all of this by themselves, but they will quarterback that work. So a company needs to really understand, and you as a privacy professional need to ensure that you're advocating for an education company that it's going to take a number of different resources, whether they're in-house or external.
It's a really interesting point of view, because I think a lot of people who hire privacy people think, oh, the privacy person can do all the things. except a privacy person literally can't do anything without knowledge from anyone else. They're unable to even write a notice if you don't understand what's happening, and you have to understand what's happening by talking to the people who are responsible for the product or the service or the marketing or the sales or the HR activities. Otherwise, I always say many companies will ask us to help do that full service implementation for them, and we will. And I'll say, but we still have to actually talk to the people, because otherwise I'm going to write Mickey Mouse. I don't know what you're doing. Someone has to be able to communicate. And whether you're an internal privacy person, it's the same thing. You have to be in tune with what happens today and then what happens tomorrow when the business changes.
Totally. And you have to
do your job.
Folks. Yeah. I mean, especially as an outside advisor, but even internally, when I was a bit more junior and took over privacy at AppNexus, it was early days, right? It was pre-GDPR. This was kind of like the first wave of really putting more sophisticated programs in place, I think, at companies outside of healthcare and financial sector. And in non-shocking news, I was given SMEs that were a bit more junior. And I was frankly kind of siloed away from the engineering team at first. And I finally just pounded down our CEO's door and was like, this is a waste of time. We've been cycling for months. You've given me a bunch of product managers who are great and smart people, but they don't actually know the details. They're not in the code. They don't actually know how we are using data and what we're doing. They just know high level what's going on. So kind of let's stop wasting time. And I ended up just sitting down for a day with our CTO, our chief architect, and all of our senior engineers, and really quickly being able to kind of spit out the answers that had taken months to get to.
Magical when that happens.
Exactly.
Wow. So, what is your best personal privacy tip or security tip you'd like to share if you were at a party?
I don't know if y'all get asked this a lot, but I'm constantly asked whether our phones are listening to us at parties. As soon as someone's like, oh, you're in the ad tech space, you're responsible for all these ads that follow us around, and you must know how, Meta and Google and everyone's operating. Our phones are definitely listening to us, right? I was just talking about Cheetos and I got shown a Cheetos ad, or I was, talking about going on vacation and I got shown a bunch of ads for TripAdvisor. And I say, well, I can't, 100% tell you that your phones aren't listening to you, because I don't know everything that all of your apps are doing, but I'm pretty confident it's not like Meta or these big companies listening to you. Instead, do you understand how your search history is used by the various players across the ecosystem? And two, they don't actually care who you are. This is just a big machine behind the scenes that, based on your search activity or based on what you looked at, is then funneling retargeting ads or other things at you. No one cares who you are. And I really don't think anyone is listening to you. And if they are, it's some sketchy app that you downloaded and didn't think about. And so take those sketchy apps off your phone and enjoy the free content that you get online.
We had another guest reminds people, their tip was to go through all those different apps and have, an app cleaning day.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. And I do it, every once in a while, or I do pay attention to those random pop-up notices that, are designed for us to ignore them or click go away, accept, and really understand what's accessing my keyboard or, accessing my location data at all times for an app that has nothing to do with your location or your keyboard.
I actually have a new tip that I thought of.
A new tip?
Yes. So Julie, I'd love your opinion on this. What would you think of the idea of, for all of the employees of your company, your company would supply them and show them how to set up a password manager, and it would be free, with the idea of, you help employees set up a password manager. Now they can have long passwords that are more complex, and they won't have the same password for multiple sites.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say it's a great tip. Depending on how that password manager is making money and what they're doing, with all the access that they have. But, if they've got another way of making money and they're not doing anything with your data, great.
When you are not advising on privacy, what do you like to do for fun?
So we were talking about this before we kicked things off, but I live at the beach, so I am an outdoors person, and that's tennis, beach, paddleboarding, you name it. And then I am also a skier. So in the winter, I do go west and try to get a couple days, or when I'm lucky, a couple weeks on the slopes. And then finally, I'm a massive nerd, and so I read a lot. News junkie, kind of all newspapers across all party lines. And I read a lot of international stuff just to make sure I've got every single point of view out there. And then a ton of nonfiction and fiction.
Well, I know Justin is very happy that you picked skiing west as opposed to in the Northeast, because he calls those icy hills. And the West is apparently, I'm not a skier. I just come along for the ride.
Yeah, East Coast skiing, Justin, I don't, it's been years since I've done it. I don't think it's worth it.
You have some agreement over here. Well, Julia, we're so grateful that you came to join us today. If people would like to connect, where should they go?
I'm on LinkedIn, or I think LinkedIn is probably the best channel.
Awesome. Well, Julia, thank you again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.